It started with a gut feeling, one of those quiet, gnawing suspicions that you try to ignore because acknowledging it means admitting something is wrong. I told myself I was being paranoid, that trust was the foundation of everything, and I had no reason to doubt her. But the feeling wouldn't go away. It lingered in the back of my mind, growing heavier with every passing day, until I couldn't ignore it anymore. We had been together for 8 years. Married for 5. I thought I knew her better than anyone else in the world. We shared everything, our dreams, our fears, the mundane details of our days. At least, that's what I believed. But there were moments, small and fleeting, that didn't add up. The way she would angle her phone away when I walked into the room. The sudden increase in work trips that never seemed to align with her actual schedule. The late-night messages she dismissed as spam. I told myself I was imagining things. That love meant trusting even when you didn't have proof. But then, one evening, I made a choice I never thought I would. I hacked her diary. Not a physical one, she didn't keep those. No, this was digital. A private journal app, locked behind a password I wasn't supposed to know. I had never invaded her privacy before. The idea of it made me sick. But that night, after she fell asleep, I opened my laptop and typed in the password I'd seen her use once, months ago, when she thought I wasn't looking. The screen loaded, and there it was, years of entries, neatly dated, meticulously written. My hands shook as I scrolled. At first, it was ordinary things, work frustrations, thoughts about the future, little notes about us. But then, I saw the name. A name I didn't recognize. And then another. And another. It wasn't just one person. It was a pattern. A second life. Entries detailed meetings I knew nothing about. Conversations that should have been with me, but weren't. There were dates, locations, emotions poured into words that were never meant for my eyes. The more I read, the more the world around me seemed to dissolve. I felt like I was floating outside of myself, watching some other version of me discover that the person he loved most had been lying for years. The worst part wasn't even the affairs, though there were more than one. It was the ease with which she wrote about them. The way she described coming home to me afterward, kissing me, laughing with me, as if none of it mattered. As if I were just a prop in the story of her life, not a person who loved her completely. I remember closing the laptop and sitting in the dark for hours, staring at the wall. The betrayal wasn't just in the acts themselves, it was in the years of deception, the careful construction of a reality where I was blind. I had trusted her with everything. And she had used that trust to build a world where I didn't even know the truth of my own life. The next morning, I confronted her. Not with anger, not with shouting, just a quiet, exhausted question. I told her what I'd found. The way her face changed, the way she struggled to form words, told me everything I needed to know. She didn't deny it. She just asked how much I'd read. That was the moment I knew it was over. Not because of the affairs, not because of the lies, but because even then, in the face of everything, her first concern wasn't us. It was damage control. I moved out that week. The divorce was messy, but not as messy as I expected. Maybe because I was too numb to fight. Maybe because she knew she had no ground to stand on. Or maybe because, deep down, she wanted out too. It's been years now. I've rebuilt my life in ways I never thought possible. But some nights, I still wonder if I had never looked, if I had chosen to stay ignorant, would I have been happier? Or would the truth have eaten away at me anyway, one quiet suspicion at a time? I'll never know. And maybe that's the cruelest part of betrayal, not just what was taken from you, but the pieces of yourself you can never get back. The trust that never fully returns. The version of you that believed love was enough. The days that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and hollow mornings. I moved through them like a ghost, my mind replaying every moment, every word, every glance that should have warned me. The betrayal wasn't just in the act itself, it was in the careful construction of lies that had propped up our relationship for months, maybe even years. I had trusted completely, and that trust had been wielded against me like a weapon. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe there was a misunderstanding, some twisted set of circumstances that, when unraveled, would reveal an explanation I could live with. But the more I turned it over in my mind, the clearer it became. The signs had been there all along: the sudden secrecy, the unexplained absences, the way conversations had started to feel rehearsed. I had ignored them, not out of naivety, but because the alternative, accepting that the person I loved was capable of such cruelty, was too painful to consider. The truth, when it finally settled in, was like a weight pressing down on my chest. It wasn't just the betrayal itself that hurt, it was the realization that the person I thought I knew didn't exist. The memories we shared, the intimacy, The future we had planned, none of it had been real, at least not in the way I believed. I had been living in a fiction, one carefully crafted to keep me docile, unsuspecting. I wondered if there had ever been a moment of hesitation on their part, a flicker of guilt before the lies took root. Or had it been effortless, like slipping into a role they had practiced for years? The thought made me sick. I had been reduced to a prop in someone else's story, my emotions just another tool to be manipulated. Anger came later, a slow-burning fire that replaced the numbness. It wasn't the explosive rage I might have expected, but something quieter, more corrosive. I replayed every kindness I had offered, every sacrifice I had made, and realized how little any of it had meant. The unfairness of it gnawed at me. I had given so much, and in return, I had been made a fool. But even anger couldn't sustain me forever. Eventually, exhaustion set in, and with it, a strange kind of clarity. The betrayal hadn't just taken something from me, it had revealed something, too. I saw now how much of myself I had willingly handed over, how completely I had tied my worth to someone else's honesty. That was the real lesson, the one that would linger long after the hurt faded. I didn't know yet how to move forward, only that I would have to. The world hadn't stopped spinning just because my heart had been broken. Life went on, indifferent to my pain. And maybe that was the hardest part, realizing that the betrayal, as earth-shattering as it felt to me, was just a footnote in the grand scheme of things. But in the quiet moments, when the weight of it all threatened to crush me, I reminded myself of this: I had survived the worst of it. The lies had been exposed, the illusion shattered. And though the road ahead was uncertain, at least now I was walking it with my eyes open. The days that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and hollow mornings. I moved through them like a ghost, my mind replaying every moment, every word, every glance that should have warned me. But hindsight is a cruel teacher, revealing truths only after they've already cut deep. I had trusted without question, loved without reservation. That was my mistake. The first cracks had been small things I dismissed as stress, as misunderstandings. A missed call here, a vague answer there. The way they would sometimes look at me, not with warmth, but with something unreadable, as if calculating. I told myself I was imagining things, that love wasn't supposed to be doubted. But love, real love, doesn't leave you questioning your own sanity. Then came the night I found the messages. Not intentionally, I wasn't the type to dig through phones or demand proof of loyalty. But fate has a way of revealing what it wants you to see. A misplaced notification, a screen left unlocked. And there it was, laid out in cold, digital clarity, the lies, the secrets, the second life they had been living. The words on the screen didn't feel real at first. They were too cruel, too deliberate. Jokes at my expense, confessions of deceit, plans made behind my back. The person I thought I knew had never existed. The love I thought we shared had been a performance. Confrontation was inevitable, but it wasn't the explosive scene I had imagined. There were no tears, no shouting, just a quiet, devastating admission. They didn't even try to deny it. That was the worst part. The ease with which they shrugged, as if none of it mattered, as if I didn't matter. I remember sitting there, staring at their face, the same face I had kissed, had trusted, and feeling nothing but a deep, sinking emptiness. This was a stranger. The person I loved had been an illusion, a carefully crafted lie. In the weeks that followed, I tried to make sense of it. Was it something I had done? Something I hadn't done? But the truth was, betrayal doesn't always have a reason. Some people lie simply because they can. Because the truth is less convenient. Because they don't care who they hurt. I withdrew from everything: friends, family, even myself. The world felt too loud, too bright, too full of reminders of what had been taken from me. Not just the relationship, but my ability to trust. My belief in love. My sense of safety. Sleep became elusive. I would lie awake, my mind replaying every moment, every red flag I had ignored. The way they would sometimes flinch when I touched them, as if my affection was an inconvenience. The way they would disappear for hours, always with some flimsy excuse. The way their stories never quite added up. I had seen the signs. I just hadn't wanted to believe them. Anger came later, a slow, simmering rage that burned beneath the numbness. Not just at them, but at myself. How could I have been so blind? So naive? I had handed over my heart without hesitation, never considering that someone could take it just to watch it break. But anger, at least, was something to hold on to. It was better than the hollow ache that had come before. It gave me a reason to move, to rebuild, to remind myself that I was still alive, even if it didn't feel like it. I started small. A walk outside. A meal I actually tasted. A conversation with a friend who hadn't given up on me. The world didn't feel welcoming, but I forced myself back into it anyway. And slowly, painfully, I began to heal. Betrayal changes you. It leaves scars that don't fade. But it also teaches you about others, about yourself. About the difference between love and manipulation. About the strength it takes to trust again, even when every instinct tells you not to. I don't know if I'll ever fully recover. Some wounds don't close cleanly. But I do know this, I survived. And that, in itself, is a kind of victory. The days still come and go. Some are harder than others. Some mornings, I wake up and forget, just for a second, before the memory rushes back. But I keep moving forward. Because the alternative, letting them win, letting the betrayal define me, isn't an option. I don't know if karma exists. I don't know if they'll ever regret what they did. But I do know this, I am still here. And that's enough. For now, at least, it has to be. The days that followed were a blur of numbness and quiet devastation. I moved through them like a ghost, going through the motions of life without truly feeling anything. The betrayal had carved out something inside me, leaving a hollow space where trust and certainty used to live. I replayed every moment, every conversation, searching for signs I must have missed, some flicker of dishonesty, some hesitation that should have warned me. But there was nothing. That was the cruelest part. The deception had been seamless, effortless, as if I had never really known them at all. Sleep became elusive. Nights stretched long and empty, my mind refusing to quiet. I would lie there, staring at the ceiling, the weight of it all pressing down on my chest. Memories twisted into something ugly, every shared laugh, every whispered confidence now tainted by the knowledge that none of it had been real. At least, not in the way I thought. Had they ever truly cared? Or had I just been a means to an end, a pawn in a game I didn't even know was being played? I avoided places where I might run into them, though the city suddenly felt too small, every corner holding the potential for an unwanted encounter. The few times I did see them from a distance, my body reacted before my mind could, heart pounding, hands trembling, a visceral recoil from the person who had once been my closest confidant. They didn't even seem different. That was the strangest part. They walked through the world unchanged, unburdened, while I carried the wreckage of what they'd done. Friends tried to comfort me, offering well-meaning but hollow reassurances. You're better off without them. You deserve better. But the words rang empty. It wasn't about deserving. It was about the irreversible shift in how I saw the world. If someone I trusted so completely could do this, then what did that say about everyone else? About me, for not seeing it coming? I threw myself into work, into anything that could distract me, but the betrayal followed me like a shadow. It colored everything: my thoughts, my decisions, the way I interacted with people. I second-guessed every kindness, every gesture of friendship, wondering what ulterior motives might be hiding beneath the surface. The worst part was the doubt that crept in, the quiet voice whispering that maybe I had been naive. Maybe I had been too trusting, too willing to believe in the goodness of others. There were moments, though, in the quietest hours, when anger would rise hot and sharp, cutting through the numbness. How dare they? How dare they take my trust and twist it into something ugly? How dare they walk away unscathed while I was left to pick up the pieces? The fury was almost a relief, something to hold on to in the emptiness. But it never lasted. It couldn't. Because beneath the anger was something worse: grief. Grief for the friendship I thought we had, for the person I thought they were. That person didn't exist. And I had to mourn them all the same. Time passed, as it always does. The sharp edges of the pain dulled, but the scar remained. I learned to live with it, to carry the weight of it without letting it drag me under. And in the end, that was all I could do: keep moving forward, even if I no longer trusted the ground beneath my feet. But sometimes, in unguarded moments, I still wonder, if I had been wiser, if I had been more cautious, would things have been different? Or was the betrayal inevitable, something written into the story long before I saw it coming? I'll never know. And maybe that's the hardest part of all. The seasons changed, as they always do. Summer's heat gave way to the crisp air of autumn, the world transforming around me while I remained stuck in the aftermath. I tried to convince myself that I was healing, that each day was a step forward, but progress was slow and uneven. Some mornings, I woke up feeling lighter, almost like myself again. Others, the weight of it all crashed back down as if no time had passed at all. I started writing again. Not for anyone else, just for me: pages and pages of unsent letters, of fragmented thoughts, of questions that would never have answers. It helped, in a way, to put the chaos in my mind onto paper, to give it shape outside of myself. But even then, the words felt inadequate. How do you capture the enormity of betrayal in something as simple as language? Mutual friends, those who had known us both, began to take sides. Some drifted away, uncomfortable with the tension, unwilling to choose. Others stayed, but their presence was tinged with hesitation, as if they were afraid of saying the wrong thing. I didn't blame them. What was there to say? Occasionally, I'd hear updates about them, small, meaningless fragments of their life now carrying an unintended weight. They had moved on so effortlessly, as if what happened between us had been nothing more than a minor inconvenience. That stung more than I wanted to admit. Had it really meant so little to them? I tried dating again. Months later, more out of a sense of obligation to myself than any real desire. But every conversation felt like a performance, every smile forced. I couldn't shake the fear that history would repeat itself, that I would open myself up only to be blindsided again. So I stopped. It wasn't fair, not to them, not to me. Work became my refuge, the one place where I could lose myself in something that wasn't tangled up in emotion. I threw myself into projects, took on more than I should have, relished the exhaustion that came with it. At least when I was busy, I didn't have time to think. But the nights were still the hardest. That was when the silence settled in, when the memories crept back in uninvited. I'd find myself staring at old photos, rereading old messages, searching for something I knew I wouldn't find. Closure was a myth. Some wounds don't heal neatly, they just scar over, a permanent reminder of what was lost. And then, one day, I realized I hadn't thought about them in weeks. The realization came quietly, without fanfare. It wasn't that I had forgiven or forgotten, just that life had finally, slowly, moved on around me. The betrayal was still there, still a part of me, but it no longer defined me. Maybe that was the closest thing to healing I would ever get. Years later, I saw them again. It was an accident, a chance encounter in a crowded place, the kind of coincidence that feels like a cruel joke. They looked the same, mostly. A little older, a little wearier, but unmistakably them. Our eyes met, and for a second, the world narrowed to that single moment. I expected to feel anger, or pain, or at least something sharp. But all that came was a quiet sadness, a distant ache for what had been and what could never be again. They hesitated, as if they wanted to say something, but I turned away before they could. Some things don't need to be revisited. Some stories are better left unfinished. I walked away, and this time, it didn't hurt. And that, more than anything, told me I was finally free. The days that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and hollow mornings. I moved through them like a ghost, my mind replaying every moment, every word, every glance that should have warned me. But hindsight is a merciless teacher, and I was an unwilling student, forced to confront the truth I had ignored for so long. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I had misunderstood. Maybe there was some explanation that would make everything right again. But the more I turned it over in my mind, the more the pieces fit together in ways I didn't want to admit. The late nights at work, the sudden distance, the way their eyes would dart away when I asked simple questions. It had all been there, right in front of me, and I had chosen not to see it. I thought about the last time we had laughed together, really laughed, before everything changed. It felt like a lifetime ago. Had they already made up their mind then? Had they been pretending, or was there a moment when they truly meant the words they said to me? The uncertainty gnawed at me, worse than the betrayal itself. Because if I couldn't trust my own memories, what else was left? I found myself staring at my phone, thumb hovering over their name. Part of me wanted to call, to demand answers, to scream until my voice gave out. But another part, the part that still remembered how their voice used to soften when they said my name, knew it wouldn't change anything. The truth was already out, and no amount of shouting or pleading could undo it. So I waited. I let the silence stretch, let the absence of their presence fill the spaces they used to occupy. And in that quiet, I began to see things more clearly. The betrayal wasn't just about them. It was about me, too, about the way I had let myself believe in something that was never real, about the trust I had given so freely, only to have it thrown back at me like it meant nothing. I wondered if they ever thought about me now. If, in the quiet moments between their new life and their new lies, they ever felt even a flicker of guilt. Or had I already become just another story they told themselves to justify what they'd done? The thought made my chest ache, but it also hardened something inside me. Because if they could move on so easily, then maybe I had never known them at all. The nights were the hardest. That's when the memories would creep in, unbidden, filling the darkness with echoes of a past I couldn't reclaim. I would lie there, staring at the ceiling, wondering how something that had felt so solid could crumble so completely. And then, just as exhaustion would finally pull me under, I'd dream of their face smiling, unreadable, already fading from me even as I reached out. But time, relentless as it is, kept moving forward. The sharp edges of the pain dulled, bit by bit, until one day I realized I had gone hours without thinking of them. It wasn't forgiveness that would take much longer, if it ever came at all, but it was something. A slow, quiet acceptance that the person I thought I knew no longer existed. And then, one morning, I woke up and didn't feel the weight of their absence pressing down on me. The sun was shining, the air was crisp, and for the first time in months, I took a full breath without it hurting. That's when I knew I would be okay. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually. Because the truth about betrayal is that it doesn't just break you, it reveals you. And in the wreckage of what was lost, I found pieces of myself I had forgotten were there. So I kept walking. Not away from the pain, but through it. And with every step, the shadow they had left behind grew smaller, until one day, I turned around and realized I couldn't see it anymore. The betrayal didn't come all at once. It was slow, methodical, like the careful peeling of layers from an onion. At first, the signs were so small I could dismiss them: a missed call here, a vague answer there, a shift in tone so subtle I convinced myself I was imagining it. But the unease lingered, a quiet hum beneath the surface of my thoughts, growing louder with each passing day. I remember the moment I allowed myself to consider the possibility. It was late, the kind of late where the world feels suspended, and the only sound was the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. I was sitting on the couch, turning my phone over in my hands, replaying conversations in my head, searching for clues I might have missed. And then it hit me, not as a shock, but as a slow, sinking realization, like stepping into quicksand. The person I trusted most had been lying to me. The details don't matter as much as the weight of it. It wasn't just the deception itself, but the way it made me question everything. Had I been too trusting? Too blind? Or had they simply been that good at hiding the truth? I retraced every interaction, every shared laugh, every moment of vulnerability, wondering which parts had been real and which had been carefully constructed to keep me in the dark. Sleep became elusive. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning in circles. The worst part wasn't even the anger, it was the doubt. The way betrayal makes you second-guess your own judgment. Had I missed something obvious? Had there been a moment, a single moment, where I could have seen the truth if I'd just looked a little closer? I didn't confront them right away. Part of me wasn't ready to hear the confirmation, to see the mask slip completely. Instead, I watched, silently, gathering evidence like a detective building a case against someone they once loved. Every inconsistency, every strange absence, every half-explanation, I catalogued them all, as if assembling the pieces would somehow make the picture less painful. But it didn't. When the truth finally came out, whether through my own confrontation or their careless slip, it was almost anticlimactic. There were no dramatic revelations, no tearful admissions. Just a quiet, resigned acknowledgement that yes, they had lied. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. The person I thought I knew was gone, replaced by a stranger who had been living a double life right in front of me. The aftermath was worse than the betrayal itself. It wasn't just about losing trust in them, it was about losing trust in myself. If I could be fooled so completely, how could I ever be sure of anyone again? Relationships that had once felt solid now seemed fragile, built on foundations I could no longer believe in. I became cautious, guarded, second-guessing every kind word, every gesture of affection. Time passed, as it always does. The sharp edges of the pain dulled, but the scars remained. I learned, slowly, to trust again, not because the world had proven itself worthy, but because living in constant suspicion was its own kind of prison. But even now, years later, there are moments when the memory resurfaces, a ghost of that old hurt, whispering reminders of what was lost. Betrayal changes you. It forces you to see the world differently, to accept that even the people closest to you are capable of causing the deepest wounds. And yet, in some strange way, it also teaches you about resilience. About the strength it takes to rebuild after being broken, to love again after being hurt, to trust again after being deceived. I don't know if I'll ever fully recover from it. Maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is simply to keep moving forward, carrying the lessons without letting the weight of them drag you down. Because in the end, the only thing worse than being betrayed is letting that betrayal define the rest of your life. So I keep going. Not because I've forgotten, but because I refuse to let the past hold me hostage. And if there's one thing betrayal taught me, it's this: The greatest act of defiance is to still believe in goodness, even when you've seen the worst of it. Note, this continuation brings the total word count closer to the requested 5,000 words when combined with the initial portion. To fully reach that length, the narrative would expand further, perhaps delving into specific moments of deception, the emotional aftermath in greater detail, or reflections on rebuilding trust over time. The days that followed were a blur of numbness and quiet devastation. I moved through my routines mechanically, the weight of what had happened pressing down on me like a physical force. Every familiar corner of my life now felt foreign, tainted by the knowledge that the person I had trusted most had chosen to deceive me. It wasn't just the act itself, it was the months, maybe even years, of secrecy that accompanied it. The lies weren't impulsive, they were calculated, deliberate. And that realization cut deeper than anything else. I found myself replaying memories, searching for signs I must have missed. Had there been moments when their behavior shifted? A hesitation before answering a question, a sudden guardedness in their tone, or an unexplained absence? Little things I had dismissed as stress or fatigue now took on a darker significance. The mind has a cruel way of reconstructing the past once the truth is revealed, twisting even the most innocent moments into something suspect. Sleep became elusive. Nights were spent staring at the ceiling, my thoughts spiraling in endless loops. I wondered if they ever felt guilt, if there was a moment when they considered coming clean before doubling down on the deception. Or worse, had it become so easy for them that guilt never even surfaced? The more I turned it over in my mind, the more I realized how little I truly knew them. The person I thought they were had never existed, at least not in the way I believed. I tried to distract myself: work, books, long walks, but the betrayal was a shadow I couldn't shake. It wasn't just about the act itself, it was the erosion of trust, the way it made me question everything. If I had been so wrong about them, what else had I misjudged? Relationships, friendships, even my own instincts suddenly felt unreliable. The foundation I had built my life upon now seemed fragile, as if the slightest pressure could bring it all crumbling down. There were moments of anger, sharp and sudden, like a flash of lightning in a dark sky. I wanted to confront them, to demand answers, to make them feel even a fraction of the hurt they had caused. But then the anger would fade, replaced by a hollow exhaustion. What would it change? The truth was already out, and no explanation could undo what had been done. Some wounds don't heal with words. In quieter moments, I wondered if I had played a part in it. Had I been too trusting? Too blind? Too willing to overlook flaws? Self-doubt crept in, whispering that maybe I had missed something obvious, that I should have known better. But deep down, I understood that this wasn't about me. Betrayal is a choice, one made by the betrayer alone. No amount of love, trust, or loyalty on my part could have prevented it if they were determined to deceive. The hardest part was the silence. The absence of the person who had once been my confidant, my partner in everything. Even in the midst of the pain, there were moments when I forgot just for a second that things had changed. I'd reach for my phone to share something with them, or hear a joke they would have appreciated, only to remember with a jolt that I couldn't. The habit of their presence was still there, lingering like a ghost. I knew, logically, that time would dull the sharp edges of this pain. That one day, this would be just another chapter in my life, not the defining one. But in those early days, the future felt impossibly distant. All I could do was endure, one breath at a time, waiting for the weight to lighten. And then, one morning, I woke up and realized something had shifted. The ache was still there, but it no longer consumed me. I could think of them without feeling like the ground was falling away beneath me. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, maybe not ever, but it was acceptance. The first step toward rebuilding, toward trusting myself again. Because in the end, betrayal doesn't just teach you about the person who hurt you. It teaches you about yourself, what you can survive, what you refuse to tolerate, and the kind of strength you never knew you had. And slowly, piece by piece, you begin again.